Hello everyone and welcome along to another episode of the LOPSided Podcast, the podcast for legal operations professionals by legal operations professionals. And today I'm joined by Richard Burcher.
Hi John.
How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Pleased to be here.
Good to have you on. So Richard, I usually start these podcasts by getting a bit of an understanding of the person, talking a bit about you before we get into the professional and your experience. I like to do that by asking these three random questions. And the first one is usually, who's your hero?
Richie McCaw.
Richie McCaw?
All Black captain.
Ah, okay. So this...
It's pretty obvious when you ask a Kiwi.
Fair point. I've had... they're very sports infused. We've had cricketers and footballers and rugby legends.
Yes.
Really interesting. Okay, and what's your greatest accomplishment?
Oh, I'd have to say that moving to the UK, moving to the London market in 2012 and establishing ourselves here was a terrifying experience. I mean, coming from a small country, coming to the motherland, the home of the carbolic smoke ball and ginger beer and stales, something the lawyers on the podcast will get. I can remember standing outside a certain very large law firm's office building that I'd been invited into not long after we got here, and thinking to myself, we're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. So it's been an amazing journey and hugely gratifying, the support we've had, from moving over here with one initial job, which was Charles Russell, as it then was.
Oh, you used to work there back in the day?
Yeah, well, I spoke at the Commonwealth Law Conference in Hyderabad in India in 2012, and Patrick Russell, the then senior partner, came up and chatted afterwards and was complimentary, which was nice. Long story short, the firm brought me over from New Zealand for 2.5 months in 2012 to run a major root and branch pricing and profitability project for them, and that was the beginning. I started getting calls from other firms in the London market, and we decided to relocate here in 2012. So although we're talking 12 years now, it's been a roller coaster, and it's been pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think a sign of old age, and I should caveat A&O Sherman here, but is when you've worked at firms separately before they merge, because I was at Charles Russell and I was also at Speechley Bircham, and then Charles Russell Speechleys was formed.
Yes.
Which geographically made sense because they were literally across the road, but as much as I know about that merger, but yeah, it's definitely a sign that you've been around a while, isn't it?
Oh, it is. I mean, the transition in the last 12 years has just been absolutely extraordinary. I mean, we've had the pleasure of being invited into 44 of the UK top 100 to work with them. We've worked with over 300 firms in 30 countries at last count, but this is the local market for us, and to see the transitions, and particularly around project management and pricing and legal ops, the level of sophistication now, even compared to 12 years ago, for a profession that doesn't generally move particularly quickly, it's been spectacular.
Yeah, and I mean, on that Validatum, so the kind of pricing network,
the consulting, yeah. So
piece.
we got two companies, Validatum, which was the original consulting concept that we started in 2008. Working with law firms in Australia and New Zealand. This was after my 30 years in legal practice, 7 as a managing partner. And we have barreled along doing that very happily since 2008. And the technology has been a more recent addition to our offering in response to market demand. And
we'll get on to, I think, pricing of AI is one of the questions I had here. I kind of read your thesis following the ABA, American Bar Association's announcement around AI regulation, and we can get into that in time. But I mean, Validatum, I think it was about a decade ago I first came to one of those conferences. They've been going for a while now.
Yes, we started.
They've stood the test of time, haven't they?
Yep. 2014, we started we actually put on a conference in 2014, and we did it all ourselves, which was a big mistake. Some things went very well, some things went poorly. So you learn from your mistakes. And I thought, well, we're not going to do that again. What else could we do? So because I was very keen to build a community of pricing professionals particularly within the London market, came up with the idea of the Breakfast Forum.
Yeah.
A sort of a bi-monthly event to which people like yourself were invited, and we choose a topic that we thought was pertinent and relevant and might be useful, and we'd share our thoughts. And it's just grown and grown, and we're always delighted. There are no shortage of firms that are actually keen to host it, because what we do as a kind of a quid pro quo is we'll do a management senior leadership briefing in closed session after the forum plenary session. So yeah, it works really well. It's a great way to build connections and relationships.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, stood the test of time. I mean, still going strong now, going from strength to strength from a decade ago. So
yep,
amazing stuff. And the final, well, not the final question. I've got one more. I'll squeeze in. But which song would you sing on a team karaoke night out?
Oh goodness. I'm a bit old-fashioned in a sense. I would love to have been a crooner, but I can't sing to save myself. But if I could, it would be "Bridge Over Troubled Waters," which is hardly a party song.
When you want to send everybody home, right?
Oh, that's what send them to sleep, which some would say I do anyway on a regular basis. But never mind.
and if you wasn't doing this, what would you likely be doing? Like, what would you like
Chef.
to do? Oh, okay.
Love cooking.
Keen chef.
Yeah, love cooking. Had a mother who was adamant that her sons were not going to be sent out into the world without being able to cook a 3-course meal. And so we were introduced to that very early. And it's actually one of my primary forms of relaxation. So much so that I've had a lifelong struggle keeping the weight under control. Well, I enjoy my food too much, and Scotch single malt whiskey. Yeah, no, I love it. It's creative, it's relaxing, and I thoroughly enjoy spending 2 or 3 when I've got the time, spending 2 or 3 hours putting a meal together. Yeah,
that's amazing. So, getting into it, I was keen to get you on to talk about the topic here, which law firm pricing, a 360 view. Ultimately, you know, you've been around a long time. You've worked with a lot of law firms. You've spoken and speak to a lot of pricing professionals, more commercial experts within the firms, and also the managing partners. So, what are the biggest challenges that law firms are facing right now when it comes to pricing their services?
There has been a dramatic shift in the last 3 or 4 years away from traditional KPIs and metrics to a much more laser focused attention to margins and profitability management. Traditionally, profitability didn't feature at a terribly granular level. It was more a case of, you know, have we made money as a firm or as an office or as a department? But now you've got a situation where they're basically saying, look, every job has to wash its face, every client, every matter. And so getting into that kind of granular detail is absolutely crucial. And I think firms are struggling to surface data in a way that provides them with sufficient actionable insights to better manage profitability and margins.
Okay.
There are several that are client-centric problems, challenges, or issues. Every survey that comes out from the client side highlights a desire for firms to deliver much greater budgetary certainty with their pricing and quoting, and greater transparency. And they want to know how a job is resourced, if it's been resourced optimally, you know, with the right levels of support and delegation. They want to know what firms are doing around the use of project management in order to both streamline the delivery of the work and also keep the cost down. And thirdly, as to your point earlier, they're wanting to know what technology the firms are bringing to bear, which they believe correctly will improve speed, quality, and ultimately some cost saving.
And we kind of touched on it a bit, but within that strong network of pricing experts that you converse with on a regular basis, are they reporting back on clients' changing needs and behaviours in respect of pricing requirements by way of maturity of buying legal services? So, are they still getting away with the hourly rates? Are we seeing more of a focus on alternative fee arrangements, innovative fee arrangements?
Yeah, real interesting point. The one of the problems or one of the challenges for firms dealing with the pricing aspect of the relationship with clients is it depends who they're talking to. On the client side, there are different audiences that have different motivations and drivers. So you've got the GC or the legal team, you've got the business itself, the business unit that you're probably dealing with, and taking instructions from on a day-to-day basis. You've got the sort of overarching view of the CFO or finance director. You've got and you've got procurement, and procurement in many ways, procurement fulfill an important function from a client's point of view in that they bring governance and structure to the purchasing process, and can hardly be criticised, for that. In fact, Steph Hogg, who works for us, former head of legal procurement at Aviva, said that legal was one of the last bastions of unmanaged spend in most corporates. So little wonder that procurement have come to the fore. But I think one of the problems is that they all have different motivations and drivers. The GC is concerned about reputation, is concerned about risk to the business, and therefore the quality of the work and the quality of the advice. Procurement are driven by one thing and one thing only, and that is cost savings. Indeed, in many large organisations, their remuneration structure, indeed their bonuses, pivot on being able to demonstrably show that they have saved X pounds, and their bonus can hinge off that, and promotion and that sort of thing. So little wonder that their focus is entirely around cost savings. They're not interested in any of the other considerations that go into a multifaceted buying decision, and it drives some really quite challenging and frustrating behaviour for law firms, because they need to price with an eye to who the audience is on the other side, and it can require quite different strategies.
It's such a good point. I actually did a podcast previously with Alex Liddell, who's the marketing and BD director at PwC for EMEA, and we were talking about reminiscing on the good old days, and we was talking about clients coming in with this notion of, I want you to get creative around pricing. And Alex referred to something we did around commodity-based pricing, where there was an energy company who, it was oil and gas company that said, the price of a barrel of oil is low at the moment. We need your hourly rates to be low. And we said, well, hold on a minute. Why don't we, attach the price to the price of a barrel of oil?
We've done the same thing, linked it to the Brent barrel oil price, at least in part. It's a really interesting point. One of the aspects of pricing that I find personally most enjoyable is where a client genuinely says, come up with a pricing structure that aligns your commercial interests as a law firm with our commercial interests as a corporate enterprise, because that's basically a blank slate. It is the most creative aspect of pricing. So you then start looking at, what does good look like from the client's point of view? What does bad look like? You identify some kind of pivot that will trigger a bonus or a discount or whatever, and you can get really, really creative. We've done price risk sharing arrangements around everything from an AIM listing to reverse CFAs in the employment tribunal and so forth. But the problem is, go back to procurement, and this is a real frustration, I have to say, because we're often brought in to help with really big RFP responses where there are a lot of zeros. There's often a throwaway question at the end of the RFP, and anything else in the way of creative alternative fee arrangements that you think we might be interested in. I get quite annoyed with that. I feel like filling in the box and saying, Why are you asking that? Because at the end of the day, you just want a bigger discount. We could come up with something really creative and it would be of no interest to you at all because it doesn't address your own personal metrics and KPIs, which are cost savings. And alternative fee arrangements can sometimes result in cost savings. Sometimes it can be more expensive, depending on what's important to the client. So it is futile, and we just generally respond to those with a banal. We're open to the idea of alternative fee arrangements. Now, that doesn't sound very constructive and perhaps even a little glib, so I should qualify it. The most easily understood manifestation of an AFA is fixed fees. And most lawyers, given half a chance, will run a mile from fixed fees because they tend to regard them as being consistent with scope creep, poor realisations, write-offs, poor margins, and everything horrible about day-to-day legal practice. So they're not keen on fixed fees. I personally am a massive fan of fixed fees. Why? Because from the client's point of view, it addresses a pain point. But from the law firm's point of view, a fixed fee, if properly scoped, properly priced, and properly resourced in the delivery, can actually be more profitable.
And more attractive than its relative, the capped fee.
Well, I prefer not to go there. In our master classes, we explain why the answer to can I have a capped fee is no, but we can address your concerns about budgetary certainty with a fixed fee. At least we give ourselves half a chance of coming out on the right side of the ledger with a fixed fee. We never can with a capped fee. So as far as I'm concerned, I probably, in my own firm back in the day, I probably banned the use of capped fees 25 years ago.
Yeah. So naturally, there's a lot around the outward-facing piece, but I wanted to kind of draw your attention to the inward-facing piece for a moment, which is how can law firms increase the ROI of their pricing functions? How can they set them up for success?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I'm a huge advocate of the pricing function in law firms, and I never miss an opportunity to champion their role and even to their embarrassment sometimes stand in front of a board meeting and tell them that they should be investing more in the pricing function. Traditionally, and I'm talking perhaps 10 years ago, they were viewed as a cost centre. It's just another wage or salary. I think things have moved on very, very considerably, and certainly we have a well-functioning pricing team. There is now an acute understanding of the value that they bring and deliver to the firm. In fact, there are a couple of firms that I've worked with where we were able to demonstrate that the pricing team, the pricing function, was the most profitable part of the entire firm. Which created a great business case for expansion. But I think partners have really got on board now. Most of the really good pricing teams that we have anything to do with tell me that they're swamped with inquiry, whereas once upon a time they were almost going around partners and saying, "Can I help you?" Now they're afraid to pick up the phone.
Yeah, oh, it's so true. It's interesting. I had Georgina Thorpe on a previous podcast, and we was talking about this and how the role has really evolved from pricing in the early days as something of an administrative function to pricing as an internal consultancy, kind of a commercial consultant on a matter.
Yes, yeah, it has evolved and matured very, very considerably. What's interesting though is the backgrounds of the people that find themselves in that role, and their own histories. Some like Adrian from telecommunications background originally, and
so Adrian Avanzato, at Ashurst,
absolutely,
great guy,
top bloke, and so that has to be extraordinarily valuable because they're coming in with a fresh pair of eyes, looking at things completely differently from the rest of us that know nothing other than our world. So that's always going to be healthy, but there are the skill set required to be a top pricing director is a tough ask.
Mm-hmm.
It's a multifaceted. I mean, in an ideal world, obviously highly financially numerate, of sufficient seniority and gravitas to be able to gain the respect of partners and, where necessary, hold the partners' feet to the fire and not get sacked on the spot. They have to be able to manage a team. They have to be comfortable and effective sitting alongside partners in key negotiations with the client, often face-to-face in the same room. It takes a long time for someone in that role to build that level of trust with a partner to allow them to sit beside them when they're negotiating with a key strategic client that might be spending millions a year with them. And I guess one of the things that I would like to see more is more formal development and training of people in those roles, to just continue raising the bar. I mean, ultimately, some kind of pricing MBA. I mean, there are, certainly there is recognition through the likes of the Legal Value Network and through Value Partnering Institute, as indeed they kindly did with me. But I think that further professional development, almost sort of night class type stuff and so forth, would really just continue to elevate the importance, the capability, the role and the value that they bring to a firm.
Yeah. And a kind of associated question, what does a good pricing strategy look like for a law firm?
Interesting. When a firm, as indeed I had one today, got me in and sort of said, we know that we're not particularly good at this. We want to and need to get a whole lot better at it, but we don't quite know where to start. What does a treetop helicopter view of the issue look like? And we found it helpful to break it down into 4 quadrants or 4 work streams: pricing governance, pricing analytics, pricing execution, which is partners basically, and pricing technology. So if you look at it from a transformation exercise, and not simply a little bit of professional development, CLE, then that holistic approach, that people, process and technology combination, is what firms, the best performing firms, have been doing or endeavouring to do. When you cherry pick at the problem, we're just, let's get our data really good, or let's build a really classy spreadsheet, which no lawyer on the planet will use anyway, but there you go. It's really just nibbling around the edges of the problem. So firms need to have a plan. They need to view it. I'm often asked, how long is it going to take for us to sort ourselves out? And it varies enormously from firm to firm, depending on their starting point. But as a rule, I would say 3 years, right? To get to from where you are now to where everything's, it's not to say there's no improvement after 3 years, there's still a lot, but you can say we have a well-functioning pricing capability within the firm.
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of touch on one of those 4 cornerstones of pricing strategy. You mentioned pricing technology.
Yeah.
Now, I found this to be a somewhat hit and miss area for pricing, and there are tools and there are softwares, and there are products, and you've worked on your own, right? Virtual Pricing Director.
Yeah, well, about 7 years ago, I was reading a white paper prepared by the CTO of one of the Magic Circle firms, and in it he was bemoaning the amount of shelfware that they have. Periodically do an audit of their IT stack and realise that there's all this technology that someone subscribed to years ago, paid for each year, no one knows it's there, 3 people use it, etc. And he said that it was a function of, I think, something we all understand quite well now, and that is technology on its own solves nothing. In fact, it can often make it worse. I remember when legal project management sort of hit the top of everyone's to-do list, we've got to get into this legal project management. A couple of firms rushed out and bought 500 MS project licenses, dumped them on their people and said, that's it, LPM
Job
sorted.
done, yeah.
Yeah, and of course, the rest is history, as they say. It was rubbish. So technology, if it's not preceded or at least in conjunction with its deployment, addresses the people and process part. In other words, those governance things and how do we onboard a client and where does that fit into the workflow from AML and conflict check and we've got to do a price and get an engagement letter out and so forth. So the epiphany for me was that we realised we built our international reputation on the first two, the people and process part, but we did not have a technology offering. And because we'd always aspired to have a business model that could say to a client, we can do the whole lot end to end, the consulting, the technology, the governance, the professional development and so forth, we realized it was a three-legged stool with only two legs to it. So we looked around at what was in the market at the time, and of course I look at this through the eyes of a lawyer. All right, not an analyst, not a data specialist, not an accountant, a technologist, or whatever. I looked at it from the point of view of is there anything out there that as a practicing lawyer would make my life easier? And all that was out there was what I perceived to be as varying versions of spreadsheets. Right, so I don't want to be too unkind, but I thought, not in a million years am I going to use that. If I'm representative of lawyers, then a completely different answer is required. So we've spent the last 5 years building Virtual Pricing Director, which every day I look at it and say, is that obvious? Is that intuitive? And the interesting thing is that firms that have a great pricing function, even the pricing directors will admit that they are spread so thinly, typically across major bids, pitches, tenders, individual large mandates, strategic advice to the board on annual rate reviews and so forth. They are lucky if they get to directly impact 20% of the firm's revenue.
So true.
Somewhere between 10 and 20, depending on how big the team is. Now that leaves 80 to 90% of the firm's revenue in the hands of people like me, which is not good, because I say that, as a partner, because we have a tendency to wander over to the window, scratch our head for 5 minutes and go, it feels like 50 grand.
Yeah.
And now I don't want to be unkind to all the partners, law firm partners in the world. To the extent to which it's criticism, it's a reflection on my own days in practice as well. And that's no way to run a large law firm.
No.
So we looked at it from the point of view of what could we build that would be really appealing and engaging to the lawyers, who could look at it and go, well, that's not difficult. Bright colours, lots of white space, it's intuitive, it has a big button that says click here, and it isn't scary. Compare that with putting the other solutions in front of law firms. I mean, no one has to take my word for it. They just have to go and ask any firm that's got any, and they'll say they've given up trying to get the lawyers to use them. The pricing teams find them, really helpful, which is great. But at the end of the day, I was interested in coming up with a solution for that 80 to 90%.
For the 80 to 90. And you compound to that point, which I completely agree with. Once you compound that with the old adage, which is trenched in fact, that lawyers are the best negotiators for their client and the worst for themselves.
Absolutely.
You then get to the point where it kind of reinforces the importance of the 80 to 90% move, right?
Well, correct. And one of the things that the bigger firms that either already have or are looking at taking on Virtual Pricing Director is the first thing that's occurred to the pricing team is this is going to help us amplify our reach into the firm.
Totally.
These people, are professionals, love their job, and know that they're good at it, and know that they have an impact, and they would like to be able to do more, but they're limited in their reach. And I had one say to me, some of the features and functionality in this will enable me to free up 3 junior to mid-level people who I can deploy on doing more constructive things, because the partners can self-serve. So they can do a top-down price. There's there's a price in the market for that. We start at 100 grand, and they can pull all the levers with resourcing and rates and individual fee earner level discounts and delegation leverage ratios and so forth, and watch it impacting the gross profit margin as they pull the levers. They can do it themselves. They don't need to be technologists. And they said, well, we would get 50 to 100 calls or requests a week from a partner saying, I've got to put in a proposal for this. How low can I go? And so the ability to self-service and answer that for themselves is a huge boon to the pricing team.
Yeah, and staying on the subject of technology, I wanted to pivot slightly, and I touched on this earlier. So there was a release from the American Bar Association talking about their new AI regulations, and I was fascinated with your thesis on the subject. Just kind of putting the commercial wrapper around it, like an assessment of what this means in practice for the pricing of Gen AI. Can you just give the listeners, the viewers, a bit of a kind of tweet length overview of that thesis?
Yeah, the ABA came out with a very well thought through and in many ways compelling policy statement about the kinds of things that firms should be doing around AI, all sorts of logical, ethical considerations and so forth. The aspect that I took exception to and posted an article on was the view that they expressed, which seemed deeply, deeply rooted in hourly billing. And what they were basically saying in summary was, if you use a bit of technology that enables you to do what it would have taken 100 hours to do and now can be done in 3 hours, and you can only charge for 3 hours.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Crazy when you compare it to other industries.
Oh, I know. So I presume that's what they intended. I that's how I read it. And so I just thought it was worth putting a countervailing view out there, which was that would not appear to align with the commercial reality that law firms are going to have to invest heavily in technology. And I think it's worth expanding the narrative away from simply AI to technology-enabled service delivery generally, because I think it is a broader topic. No one for 1 minute is going to suggest that we should start charging clients on a bespoke basis for your annual, Microsoft Office 365 license or anything like that. That is kind of table stakes just to keep the doors open, the lights on, and doing what we do. But some of this technology is very specialized, will only be used by certain clients on certain matters, but is very expensive. And I'm comfortable drawing an analogy with everyone from optometrists to any other specialist who invests £1 million in a piece of, very, very powerful diagnostic technology that produces far better results in less time and so forth. No one would seriously suggest that professional should not be able to, in one form or another, recoup that cost through their pricing mechanism. And so even I've used a mechanic, on car repairs where there was a line item. They had this, massive piece of diagnostic technology, all the bells and whistles, and they had a line item called technical diagnostic, and it was something like £70. That was a part of their process for recovering that capex. And as I said to you the other day when we were chatting, I was at a conference recently where there was a panel of GCs who were asked what their attitude was towards the introduction of AI, sort of a hybrid human technology delivery model. And the person asking the question was clearly trying to extract some insight into what their expectations were in terms of cost saving. Now, I've seen one view come from procurement, which was, if it would have cost 100,000 and can now be done with 70,000 worth of time on the clock, then we only want to be charged 70,000. In other words, no, you are not getting any return on your investment in the technology that achieved that saving. Wholly unreasonable, in my view. What incentive is there for a firm to do anything other than say, we'll just keep using
it encourages inefficiency.
It encourages inefficiency, which is what everyone, rightly enough, complains about. So I was heartened to hear these GCs say, and I don't know whether they could be said to be representative. There were 7 of them on the panel, a number of FTSE 100 GCs, so big corporates, and the collective attitude was, we fully expect firms to want to achieve a return on their investment in the technology. They've got to buy it, they have to maybe train it and adapt it, they have to train people to use it, and there are still people that will actually be doing it on a particular job, whether it's disclosure or DD on an M&A matter or whatever. Someone's still got to do it and oversee the process. And the attitude was, we expect to get some of the cost saving, but it would be unrealistic of us to expect to get the whole lot. So I think the example I used with you was pre-tech 100,000, post-tech 70,000. Let's call it a bill of 85.
Yeah, it's kind of like how a cap and collar would work. Right?
Exactly. So that to me is encouraging, if that is in fact representative of the attitude.
And I wanted to kind of delve deeper into that in terms of the pricing piece, because I would suggest, I would predict that I think a lot of law firms and law firm pricing professionals listening, Big Four professionals, were probably navigating, thoughts, processes from the firm in the technology piece in particular around how do we price these services?
Yes.
How do we price AI? And I've seen everything from somebody saying line items like time cards and saying how much it would have cost to how much it did cost, and showing the value there, and similar to what you said, having inflating that to show what the saving is, through to just fixed pricing, kind of productization of whatever the tool is. What's your view on that, Richard? Do you have a secret sauce you can share?
I wish I did. I'd be the first to admit that we're still all figuring it out as we go along. I think anyone who says they've got all the answers is kidding themselves. We're keeping a very close eye on it and hopefully contributing constructively to the conversation and the dialogue. I think one of the biggest single challenges is that there is now a degree of tension between the billable hour and that level of technological efficiency, where that link is now broken. So if you previously would have charged 2 associates out for a week to do something that your whiz-bang new technology does in 2 hours, then the firm's entire business model revolves around selling 6-minute units, and you've got a serious problem.
Mm-hmm.
There are 3 fundamental pricing paradigms: cost plus, which is quite obviously what does it cost to keep the lights on at a margin. It's 100 quid, so we'll charge 150 and we make money. Number 2 is the market-driven pricing. So we look around and figure out what everyone else is charging. It's about 150, so we should be there or thereabouts. The legal profession has made an art form out of those first 2. The third one is value pricing, and that's where everyone sort of shuts off and goes to sleep a bit. You can't even get a consistent definition out of anyone on what constitutes value pricing. But as a working definition, it's a price that is broadly reflective of the client's perception. That's the key, the client's perception of the value that they've got from the services. And so as I said before, the most common manifestation of that in the AFA world is fixed fees.
Mm-hmm.
And so firms are going to have to get a whole lot better at doing fixed fees.
Yeah.
For that, they're going to need data, reliable data, and they're going to have systems and processes in place and technology like Virtual Pricing Director that will actually help them risk profile the fixed fee methodology to be able to get it right 9 times out of 10. So, and then there is another problem, and that is that you can do all of those things, and there's still the elephant in the room, and that is law firms' meritocracy structures. Most things in a law firm are measured and revolve around billable hours targets and so forth. It is even before the advent of hybrid AI technology delivery, it always perplexed me that firms were myopically focused, many firms were myopically focused on the top line instead of the bottom line. As a former equity partner, frankly, all I was interested in was what dropped out of the bottom of the machine at the end of the month in my back pocket. Profit was what it was all about. So, which would you rather be? An equity partner in a firm with a turnover of 100 million and a net profit margin of 8%, or 50 million and a net profit margin of 40%. I know which one I'd rather be in. So when you say to people, look, we want you to do all of these things here, they're going, well, hang on a minute, that's just going to reduce my billable hours. No, but if you do a fixed fee and you quote the client 20,000 and they're happy with that, and you close it with only 17,000 on the clock and bill 20, that is a good day at the office. Oh, no, it's not, because that I can't get to my billable hours target. So you ask for one thing and then provide incentives that get everyone doing exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
So to say to a firm, you've got to completely rewrite your internal meritocracy structure to drive the right behaviours, it's absolutely the right thing to do. But boy, that's a mountain many don't want to climb.
It is, but I mean, the next question was going to be pretty much just that. I mean, are we experiencing a period of change where, industry, society has just truly outgrown the billable hour model of law firms, and there does need to be significant review of what constitutes high performance in lawyers?
Yeah, definitely. You're absolutely right. I'm often asked my views on the billable hour. It's one of those sort of, I was going to say party questions. It's a pretty sad party if you're talking legal fees, but yeah. It's one that I'm often put on the spot for because people just want to know where we stand on it. I try not to be an extremist. There are those who say it's the billable hour or nothing else works. Then at the other end, you've got a small coterie of folk who proclaim that it's dead and it should be taken out the back and shot and all the rest of it. I don't buy that. In our masterclasses, what we teach is that there are a whole variety of pricing techniques and strategies, one of which is the billable hour. A partner is much better served by expanding their pricing vocabulary and repertoire to be able to talk about a range of things, be they cap and collars or risk sharing or retainers or a variety of other techniques, and be able to discuss those constructively with the client. I try to project it as a menu. Now, you don't go to a restaurant. Well, I'm sure there are restaurants around there that only have one item on the menu, but not ones that we typically patronise. Generally, you go in and decide from the menu what you feel like tonight. Now, you might be vegan, you might be vegetarian, you might like your steak still running around the plate. The restaurateur wants to sell you something, so provide you with some choice to try and keep a reasonable range of people happy. If we apply that philosophy to clients, for some clients, the absolute priority is the cheapest, right? Doesn't matter. We don't want a relationship. We don't care about anything else. We just want this done for as little as possible because it's not terribly important. It's BAU, it's housekeeping, it's a box we need to tick. We don't want to spend any more than we have to. For others, they're less concerned about the cost as a quantum issue, but boy, do they want budgetary certainty. I want you to give me a number, and I don't mind if it's even a little bit toppy, but we're not having the conversation again.
So your set menu.
the ability for a partner to be able to move through the menu in a discussion with the client and go, well, here are a couple of options you might consider. They've each got advantages and disadvantages, which I'll explain to you. But it's your money, it's your deal, your dispute. I'm going to let you decide and make an informed choice as to which one of these methodologies is best suited for this particular matter. That is a much more sophisticated way to have a pricing conversation with a client.
Totally. And I think we're probably delving into the psychology of pricing there.
Yes.
And that is a separate podcast we'll need to do, Richard. Look, this has been fascinating, and thanks for coming on.
No, my pleasure. My pleasure. I never tire of talking about it. You know, you would think that being a little long in the tooth now, and having been around a while, I'd be sick of the whole thing. But you know, I get in a conversation like this, or talking to a board or a managing partner or whatever, and I can see the potential and the opportunities, and I still get a lot of satisfaction out of what I do.
There is one element of the podcast that I always try and get in, which is it's kind of demystifying the rumours, fact or fiction around things, statements that are being heard in the hallways, at the conferences, not necessarily validating, but others possibly. And I pose those questions to the experts, and I ask them to kind of validate those as a statement, or in fact, you know, dismiss them as rubbish. And being with the big tech budget that we have on the podcast, here is your button.
I'm gonna have to get one of those.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I brought that in on the train today. I travelled in by train, and it was just kept going off in my bag, which was pretty awkward. But anyway, I digress. Okay, so as I say, I'll a couple of statements here. I'll read them out. If they're rubbish, hit the button and just give us some clarity on why. And if they're in fact factual, it'd be great to hear your views.
Okay.
So the first one is, law firms can price AI and tech solutions in the same way as they've historically priced conventional legal services. Straight in there.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. They're going to have to completely reconceive what it is they're selling. The profession has been dominated by a mindset that we sell 6-minute units. That's it. We sell 6-minute units. We do not, any more than you or I go into a travel agent and say, I'd like to buy 3 hours on a plane. We don't. We buy results and outcomes. We want to get from A to B. The client wants to get you into a dispute or out of a dispute, or into a property or out of a deal or whatever. So to think that the entire economic model, which has been with us for at least 4 decades, is going to remain unchanged with the advent of technology that can now do things in a fraction of the time that we would have charged, is delusional.
There you are. And the last question, the second question, was law firms are doing enough to prepare for tech-focused pricing requirements from clients. So just to clarify that statement, clients coming back to them and saying, hey, we know you've got this AI. How much is it going to cost you to run that across my doc review, say, as an example?
Yeah, I think that firms are alive to the problem. The message that I'm getting talking to pricing folk and firms is that they aren't yet coming under a lot of pressure from clients. Okay. There will be exceptions to that, but I think there is an almost a symbiotic realization that this is new territory for both clients and firms. And as long as there is a good relationship and one that functions on trust and dialogue and collaboration, the very essence of legal ops and so forth, that we'll kind of figure it out together. That's what I'm seeing and feeling. And as I said before, no one has those answers. Mm-hmm. So we're kind of making it up as we go along. And I think as the technology evolves, so the sophistication with which the pricing of that technology will also evolve.
Interesting stuff. I'm actually going to add a question to this just because I'm enjoying this so much, and we could talk all night on this subject. So we're talking about tech pricing. I had a broader question for you, or statement for you to validate or not. Law firms without pricing functions will be at significant risk of losing out on a lot of work going forward.
Totally agree. I worry that there are firms have to make a decision about what resources they can afford, and one of the things that holds back smaller firms, I should try and quantify that. So I'm sometimes asked, we have a turnover of X. Are we big enough to justify having some kind of pricing function, even if it's only one person? It's hard to be too specific, but it's also unhelpful for viewers, listeners to evade the point. So I'm going to say a firm with a turnover in excess of 70 million can easily justify having at least one pricing professional. Now, there are firms with revenues of hundreds of millions, not too many, but hundreds of millions, who are only just beginning to think about it. I am pleased for those firms that they are, and we're working hard with some of them to close the gap, as it were, and play catch up. But for those for whom it's not even on their radar, I think they're going to wake up one day and find that everyone's sailed past them. I really do. And I think as the pricing function becomes more sophisticated, by the time they realise they're behind, it's going to be too late. Not the least of the reasons for which being that smart people in the pricing function are in high demand.
They are.
The demand exceeds supply. And so you can't just sort of rustle up somebody to fulfill that function at a moment's notice.
Richard,
My
thank
pleasure.
you so much for your time.
Thanks so much, John.